Hey everybody, it's Greg the Ghoul coming to you from within Phantasm Comics here in New Hope, PA. And I wanted to spotlight a collection that we have here in the shop. Some fanzines. You know, way before the internet, before there were message boards, there were fanzines. Little hand-stapled, fan-created little magazines. People would send in their letters. They would write their critiques, fans of a particular fandom. So we had stuff like Edgar Rice Burroughs fandoms or H.P. Lovecraft. I mean, there were fanzines for anything that you can imagine, really. Star Trek, Star Wars, comic books had their own fanzines, and it was a way for nerds to network back before the internet. And fanzines are kind of difficult to find these days, unless you're really hunting for them at the flea markets or at conventions. Mostly is where I found all of mine, and eBay. They're really tough to come by. The people that love fanzines seem to hold on to their fanzines. So I wanted to spotlight the collection that we have here, which focuses mostly on H.P. Lovecraft. So if you guys are into that sort of thing, stay tuned to see what we got. Personally, I'm a collector of fanzines. I love horror movie fanzines. I'm a huge fan of anything to do with horror movies, as most of you know. And one of my favorite books I've gotten recently is Xerox Ferox. So check this book out if you can. I believe it's out of print, but you might be able to find a copy for a decent price. And this book is just like the fanzine encyclopedia when it comes to horror movies. I love this thing. I try and go through here and track down some fanzines that I don't have. But if anyone out there is looking to sell some horror fanzines, I'm your buyer, so get in touch with me. But let's dive into what's here in our shop right now. So stay tuned if you want to see some fantasy, sci-fi, and horror-related fanzines. Alright, let's get into it. Okay, so right over here in the store is our fanzine section. You know, we've got this short box filled with some stuff here. Right beside it is a modern zine, the Drive-In Asylum. And we also have, let's see, all the way over here, Slash Dance, another modern zine, a horror zine here. So we're always buying new zines as well. So if you enjoy reading in the physical format and you want to get some insight into the horror world, past and present, check these out. What we're going to look at today is the vintage H.P. Lovecraft. Alright, let's dive in. Starting things off in no particular order with Crypt of Cthulhu number 2 with a fun cover art by Robert Price. Crypt of Cthulhu is an American fanzine devoted to the writings of H.P. Lovecraft and the Cthulhu mythos, formally established in 1981 by Robert Price, who edited the full run. This issue is notable for essays by Brian Lumley and L. Sprague de Camp. Like I said, moving in no particular order, this is issue 53 from 1988, cover art by Robert Knox, who did 15 covers, best known for Necronomicon Press, Crypt of Cthulhu, and Hippocampus Press, specializing in dark fantasy, horror, and humor. Ink, oil, acrylic, and sculptures are his media of choice. I love his artwork with color. Essays by S.T. Joshi, a name that will pop up much more, Lynn Carter, and Robert Bloch. Issue number 5, zooming in from 1982, cover by editor Robert Price. Great issue delving into the occult connections to the mythos with an essay, Lovecraft and Witchcraft, by Morgana A. Levine. Young in Lovecraft on Pre-Human Artifacts by Price himself. Jumping all the way to issue number 89 from 1985, cover art by Alan Kozowski, and he will do 14 more covers. His art has been published since 1973, but he didn't start submitting professionally until 1982. He is a titan in the zine world when it comes to art. He is a collector himself of genre books and magazines, possessing nearly 20,000 items of the sort. He prefers to work in pen and ink and will pop up much more. Swooping way back to issue number 3 from 1982 with a wild cover by Jason C. Eckhart, most essays by Robert Price, and a book review of New Tales of the Cthulhu Mythos by the great Ramsey Campbell, reviewed by C.J. Henderson. Eckhart comes from an artistic family. At age 12, he decided to become an artist. He's a lifelong devotee of the Lovecraft writings. Here comes issue 4 with artwork by Eckhart again. Crypt of Cthulhu ran for 107 issues over a span of 20 years. The first 75 issues were published by Price under his label Cryptic Publications. The next 26 issues were published by Necronomicon Press, and the last 6 were published by Mythos Books. The magazine went inactive for years, but was revived by Necronomicon Press in 2017 with issue number 108. Of course, issue 16 is one of my favorite covers, doing an EC comic swipe, Tales from the Crypt of Cthulhu. This is a fun issue. It's an all-fiction issue with classic names contained within, such as Clark Ashton Smith, Robert E. Howard, Robert Bloch, August Derleth, and Dwayne W. Ramel. Cover by the always fantastic Stephen Fabian. Revelations from Yuggoth, number 3, another cryptic publication. Editor was a Sean Ramsey. This ran for 3 issues and was an anthology of short fiction and poetry. Stories by Henry Kuttner, Henry S. Whitehead, Richard Tierney, and more. Covered by Peter Smith. Back to the Crypts with issue number 52, cover art by Guy Cowlishaw. Not seeing much about him beyond the cover, some nice creepy stories contained within by Jim Court and Charles Garofalo, and reviews selection delves into the Complete Crow collection by Brian Lumley. Crypt number 54, subtitled The Fishers from Outside, is a Lynn Carter memorial issue. The back cover contains Carter's obituary. This issue contains 10 of Lynn Carter's short stories. Carter is a titan in the sci-fi fantasy horror genre, editing the Ballantine adult fantasy series in the 70s, which we had a complete run of last fall, 2019. He created his own fantasy fanzine titled Kadath after Lovecraft's fictional setting The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath. Lasted just the 1 issue and has a very low print run. It contained his mythos story, City of Pillars. This is the second all-Carter issue. Crypt 55, subtitled The Cryptophile, an index to the first 50 issues, spanning 1981 to 1987, compiled by Mike Ashley, giving you an index to contributors, a checklist for issues, and an index to authors and works discussed within the issues. Crypt 60 brings us another Robert Knox cover portraying Robert H. Barlow, an interesting person in the real-life cast of characters surrounding Lovecraft. After exchanging letters, Lovecraft would take extended visits to Barlow's home in Florida. Later editing Barlow's work, Lovecraft named Barlow his literary executor. Given as a title of honor, it was a curse placed upon him. Barlow mismanaged the work. Disgraced, he left to teach anthropology in Mexico. Collected here are his short stories and essays on the man, Barlow. Issue 61.5 is all the stuff that didn't fit into issue 61. This issue is packed with reviews by resident book critic Stefan Dziemianowski. He'll be a Crypt regular and is still active writing book reviews in Locus magazine. Issue 43 with a classic cover by Alan Kay, spotlight issue on Ramsey Campbell. Collecting 8 of Campbell's mythos-related short stories, Campbell, a British writer, has been active since the early 60s. When asked what his favorite Lovecraftian stories were, he said, Notebooks Found in a Deserted House by Robert Bloch, The Space Eaters by Frank Belcamp Long, The Ceremonies by T.E.D. Klein, and The 37th Mandala by Mark Laidlaw. There's some recommendations by Ramsey Campbell to seek out. Some good stuff there for sure. Issue 67 of Crypt is subtitled The Plains of Nightmare, an all John S. Glasby issue. Cover art by D.L. Hutchinson. Glasby was a prolific British author during the 50s and 60s. He produced over 300 novels and short stories, most written under a pseudonym. This particular issue is full of his mythos work, and this issue is also notable for the interior art by Bruce Timm. Crypt 68, fantastic cover by S. Thomas Brown. This is a Thomas Ligotti issue containing 9 of his short stories. Ligotti is a modern horror master, most active from the late 80s to the mid-2000s. His first notable work can be found in Nyctalops, a zine published by Harry O. Morris. The short contained within is titled The Chemist from 1981. Issue 70 sees the return of 2 familiar names, Jason C. Eckhart on the cover, and Lynn Carter, collected again for a spotlight issue with the subtitle Necronomicon. Carter occasionally would submit titles of the mad Arab Abdul al-Hazred. His adventures would make up the fabled Necronomicon. Compiled here are those stories by Carter. Crypt 79 has a sick Alan Kay cover. Contained within is another spotlight issue, this one on Dwayne W. Ramel, American sci-fi, fantasy, and erotic writer. He's most well known for his collaborations with H.P. Lovecraft. He was co-editor with Francis Laney on The Acolyte, 1942 to 1946, which published several HPL stories, and has the first glossary of Cthulhu mythos. Crypt 86 from 1994 is a beast, clocking in at 72 pages. Cover art by David F. Hansen. They must have been good sellers, or they just ran out of ideas, because it's another spotlight issue devoted to Richard L. Tierney. Tierney is an American poet and writer and HPL scholar. He is one of the first to challenge August Derleth's interpretation of Lovecraft's creation in his article, The Derleth Mythos, published in 1973's Fanzine HPL. This issue contains some short stories and a few of his poems and a novelette. Slinking all the way back to 18 from 1983 with a cover by editor Robert Price, this issue is filled with essays, one by previously mentioned Dwayne Ramel, titled H.P. Lovecraft As I Knew Him, another by Sam Gafford, Lovecraft's influence on Stephen King, and a great article by Dennis Dumars, The Lurker in the VCR, more H.P. Lovecraft on the screen. Issue number 20 from 1984 is the first issue published by Cryptic Publications, covered by Jim Garrison, published simultaneously with issue 21, focusing on the HPL poetry. Jim Garrison would just do 2 Cryptic Cthulhu covers, this and issue 32. Issue 62 of Crypt from 1989 has a great Alan Kay cover. This is a focus on the mythos works of Robert A.W. Lowndes. Lowndes was an American writer, editor, and fan of science fiction. A young Lowndes received encouragement from Lovecraft, and he wrote a number of dark fantasy stories. In 1963, he initiated the magazine of Horrors from 63 to 71, which mixed reprints with new stories, and the magazine was popular and spawned several companion mags to go with it. Issue 63 with another outstanding cover by Alan Kay, and that contains the Sussex Manuscript, a novella by Fred Pelton. The Sussex Manuscript is a fragmentary and inaccurate translation of the Latin Necronomicon into English by Frederick I, Baron of Sussex. Pelton wrote the illuminated manuscript. Issue 32 is covered with a great Jim Garrison art from 1985. The issue focuses on At the Mountains of Madness, probably one of Lovecraft's more well-known stories, originally written in 1931 and rejected by Weird Tales, eventually getting serialized in February, March, and April of Astounding Stories 1936. Mixing It Up with Ashes and Others by H.P. Lovecraft and Divers Hands, 1982, a collection of revisions of the works of others, drafts of revisions, and his own influence on a story. Basically, this is one for the completists compiling dropped stories or long-omitted pieces forgotten in the pulps of old. This Halloween Orange is one of 50 first printings. Ashes is actually issue 10. Issue 33 gives us our simplest-looking cover yet. It's reproduced from Dirk W. Mosig's The Miskatonic, and guess what? This is a Dirk Mosig issue. Essays collected by the man himself, and an essay about Mosig by S.T. Joshi. He calls him the greatest of Lovecraft scholars. Alan Kay with the cover art for issue 40 from 1986, doing a Psycho homage, and at first you might think that's Hitchcock looming, but this is a literary fanzine. That's Robert Bloch, the author of Psycho. Bloch fans, this issue is packed with goodies, from essays on his mythos writing, an interview with the man himself, and a short story from 1939 by Bloch, The Sorcerer's Jewel. Here comes issue 41, an all Henry Kuttner issue, and that has a Robert Knox cover right on there. That looks really good. Kuttner was a personal friend of Lovecraft and Clark Ashton Smith and contributed a bunch to the mythos. This issue collects all of his Weird Tales fiction. Alan Kay, again on the cover for issue 50 from 1987. As you can imagine, it's an all Ramsey Campbell issue. We've mentioned him before here. This issue is mostly comprised of Ramsey Campbell short stories and essays. He even submitted his own artwork. They basically said, Ramsey Campbell, you take over this issue, and he did. Crypt 25 with the Stephen Fabian cover is an all-fiction issue. Frank Bellenkamp, Long, Carl Jacobi, Clark Ashton Smith, Robert E. Howard, Hubie Cave. It's like a Weird Tales reunion. Fabian specializes in sci-fi and fantasy illustrations, self-taught. Two of his favorite primary influences were Virgil Finlay and Haynes Bloch. Personally, one of my favorites as well. Crypt 28 with a Robert Price cover. He seems to do the more playful covers. This issue delves into the non-mythos tales. We have an essay on the color out of space, which just got a big screen adaptation by Richard Stanley. And of course, that Blu-ray is in stock now at Phantasm Comics. Crypt 31 from 1985 gives us a great Fabian cover. He's really invoking Finlay vibes here. Another all-fiction issue here. So if you want to curl up on the couch with some Coco and Cthulhu horror, this is the issue for you guys. It's filled with some great creepy stories. Crypt 44 from 1986 gives us another wild Jason Eckhart cover. It's a poetry issue. S.T. Joshi credited with introductions, and he collected the poems, acting as an uncredited editor. S.T. is one of the leading authorities living on not only H.P. Lovecraft, but Ambrose Bierce and H.L. Mencken, and others mostly in the supernatural fiction realm. He has written many critical studies about the weird authors, many of those books now collector's items themselves. More active than ever, he is currently working on a piece he has teased for a long time, the recognition of H.P. Lovecraft, his rise from obscurity to world renown. This month alone, July 2020, he wrote 50,000 words, so the man has some thoughts on H.P. Lovecraft. And finally, our last issue to show off, number 46 from 1987, with a cover by S. Thomas Brown, and I think it's fitting for this to be the last and possibly nerdiest, a look at Lovecraft's letters. It's estimated Lovecraft wrote more than 50,000 letters in his short life, dying at 46. His letters gave insight into who the man was and his works, and this Crypt issue delves into the mythos-related writings. Well, that wraps up our rundown of all the zines we have here in the shop. I love these little things. These are from a bygone era. You know, I'm happy to see people are still making zines. We're bringing them in when we can find them. And we're always buying zines when collections come in. So stop in and pick up a few of these old-fashioned zines, guys. And never forget to pick up your comics at the comic shop. Thanks.